Morning, students. Today we would be discussing about capacity planning in cloud. So what is capacity planning? Capacity planning is basically about uh, developing a strategy. There should be a strategy that guarantees that the resources are sufficient to meet the demands of the users at a minimal possible cost. So capacity planning is about ensuring that adequate number of resources, here we have resources, and then there are consumers, there are several consumers. The question that arises is how to have a plan such that all the consumers get all the requested resources for a minimal price. That is all about capacity planning. And how actually it is carried out. In order to understand that, first try to get the idea that cloud service providers create an illusion that uh, the resources are unlimited in number. On the contrary, they are not. There are limited physical servers and limited virtual servers. However, user, a consumer, should get its requested resource without any disruption. Consumer should not be made to wait and should not be made to uh, pay higher price. Whenever consumer demands for a resource, it should be made available. All right, how this can be simulated in a traditional computing environment? In that, whenever a business is set up, the owner of the business purchase the required resources. These required resources can be a server, client terminals, softwares, licenses, OS license, any other enterprise application license. These are the things that are required for anyone to set up a business, and they have to purchase it in advance before the business actually gets started. These are the prerequisites. Without computing power, no business operates. This is what happens in a traditional environment. Coming to a cloud environment, a business owner has to have all the resources at his disposal whenever and from wherever the consumer demands. These purchases in the form of hardware and software, they are unique to this business. No one else can use it, and these satisfy the requirements for this business, these resources. So they are at its disposal anytime. There is no interruption in the business because everything is set up unless and until a failure or any problem occurs in the hardware or software, everything go on smoothly. Going ahead, when cloud is being used for hardware and software requirements, businesses should also get the feel that the resources which have been allocated to the businesses are unique to that business, and business will function very quite smoothly. This is the idea of planning the capacity, which implies the requirements and the demand. If I give you another example, when you go to a, say, any eatable shop, when you go to an eatable shop where you get burgers, pizzas, for instance, and you are a consumer. You are a consumer of that business, and business provides eatables. Business is open. You go to business center and you request for a burger, but then the material is over. There are no buns, there are no vegetables. So then this customer cannot get the demand fulfilled here by this business, because this business capacity planning is done in the morning, wherein they purchase the required material to be used for a particular number of uh, customers. So if they plan, if they say that today 100 customers will buy burgers based on their previous experience. They plan in that manner, and then, for instance, 150 customers arrive. First 100 customers get the product, whereas later arrivals will not be delivered with the uh, products due to the inavailability of the resources. To make a burger, you need resources, that is the material, and which is not available because your capacity planning has been failed. You could not anticipate, and you could not properly meet the demand of the customer. Capacity planning is not only essential for cloud, it's very important for any business for that matter. Even banks have to do capacity planning, and restaurants have to do, many businesses have to do this capacity planning. And this is all about the introduction to capacity planning. I hope it's clear. For any doubts, you can unmute and ask. Now the question that arises is, why to do capacity planning? Why not directly start the business, open it, run it, close it, any business for that matter? Capacity planning is quite essential because it guides the business owners about how many consumers or customers may ask for the services, and whether he or she is prepared to serve the demands of the consumers. Many times the prediction or the capacity planning turns out to be unpredictable. You can't figure out exactly how many consumers will access the resources for a given period of time. However, um, to a great extent, this is possible by the involvement of both consumers and providers. With respect to cloud, providers can have a strong understanding of the consumers' requirements, and consumers as well should know their requirements and provide them in SLA, service level agreement, or can specify in advance, or can have a pattern of resource access, which assess the providers to get to know which customer access how much resources at a particular time. When you create an account in AWS, perhaps you specify your profession to be um, Alright, you specify your profession to be student, to be software developer, academician, or manager, or whatever. And then the provider, based on the profession, also keeps track of the resources usage. That's also one way of knowing the pattern of usage, which further assessed in capacity planning. So this is all about the introduction to capacity planning. uh, it is extremely essential aspect in cloud. In computing, how is capacity planning relevant? It's pretty relevant because computing has become an essential item for any person in this age. It's like any other resource like electricity, water, food grains. To that list, you can add computing resources as well. So, computing resources have become a part of daily life in this age, and therefore, capacity planning has turned out to be an essential service or planning for the providers. How it is used to done traditionally. Traditionally, the capacity planning in computer has been performed in what is known as silos. Silos are isolated storages or data centers to stock the resources. Silos, nothing but like warehouse. The warehouse where all the computing facilities are gathered. That particular place is known as a silos. Here you will find all the servers. Based on the capacity planning, if it is decided to have 9 servers, all the 9 servers are placed in silos, and these 9 servers will provide service to various outsourcing or third party consumers. However, this kind of setting gives rise to two problems. There is a over provisioning and under provisioning problem. We had already discussed about over and under provisioning, but to quickly um, get to know the definition, over provisioning is a condition in which there are more resources than required. Under provisioning is a state wherein uh, the resources number is less than what is required. So if it is planned to have 9 servers, and the usage turned out to be essentially for 20 servers, then the problem that arises is under provisioning. And instead of 9 servers, if only 3 are in use, that implies that 6 servers are excess, which implies that this silos has over provisioning of resources. Capacity planning in cloud computing. Cloud computing is a setup in which we have multi-tenant environment. If you recall, multi-tenant environment is um, a, a setting in which there are several consumers that are accessing the resources by being in their isolated space. No one interfere with the another consumer. This consumer will not interfere with this, and this one will not interfere with this, and this one will not interfere with this. They have their own allocations in their own space. That is an isolated space, and each resource in a cloud is typically shared among several tenants, several consumers. However, they don't interfere and interrupt with each other um, usage. Rather, they have their own virtual environment. That virtual environment creates an illusion that uh, that tenant or consumer is the only one who is accessing that resource. So resource sharing through resource virtualization, these are the features of cloud. And then how it is done in cloud? In two ways. Before discussing about the two parties or two ways involved in that, understand that the concept of infinite resource in cloud is just an illusion. It is not a reality. This illusion has been created because of several other properties of cloud, such as virtualization, isolation, sharing. This addresses the important question of planning capacity. Um, who is responsible for doing capacity planning? It is done at two levels. How it is done at two levels? There are consumers, several consumers, and there are providers. These providers perform capacity planning at one level, and these consumers plan their capacity as well in another level. Before going to a bank, you plan that you are going to withdraw, say, 5,000 rupees. You say that you are withdrawing 5,000 rupees, and here bank also performs capacity planning, that bank is going to issue a maximum amount of 2 lakhs to one particular customer, and all the other uh, customers will get less than 2 lakh. Means they can get 2 lakhs or less, it means. So there is a capacity planning at one end as well as at the other end. And how this is done? This consumer of the cloud may plan to access CPU for 1 hour with 10 GB of memory. This is the planning made by a consumer, and this provider also makes a plan that when a customer requests for a CPU for 1 hour, it can be allocated without any hassle. So eventually there should not be any resource crunch. Resource crunch in the sense that a consumer requests for a resource and there are no resources to be allocated to the consumer. That situation should not arise in a cloud environment, because many businesses and startups, individual users require the resources on cloud at their you know important and significant decision making times. When they require, if it is not given, their business may have to incur some loss. As if a student is doing a project on cloud and tomorrow is the project submission day, and cloud provider does not allocate the resources to student will not be able to complete the project and will not be able to submit and will incur a loss in the form of exam failure. That's why it's extremely important for cloud, uh, as well as for consumers, to plan the capacity of resources. So there are again users divided into two groups: as users and SaaS and PaaS users. As users, they have to reserve a fixed capacity of resources. As users are hardware users. As is infrastructure, that includes processor, memory, disk. SaaS and PaaS are software users, wherein PaaS is a platform providing operating system um services, whereas SaaS is software services. This SaaS and PaaS can can have a dynamically metered setup. Since these are something software in nature, not physical in nature, they can be dynamically set up on a billing and metering basis. On the contrary, as essentially implies that it is the access to the physical capacity of a resource, then it would be better to reserve the fixed capacity, like reserving a seat. Seats will be fixed in a restaurant. If there are 50 tables, if all the 50 tables are occupied, you have to wait until somebody leaves the table. Okay, this is like not very desirable for you for a restaurant as well. You are waiting and in a lounge and then asking whether a table got empty or not. Instead of that, if you reserve a table uh, ahead in time, then you directly go and just uh, take the table, occupy the table. You don't have to wait. And if a restaurant allows only reserving facility, then no one can walk in the restaurant and ask for a table, because their policy will be that only consumers who um, reserve a table get the table. That way there won't be any resource crunch, there won't be any uh, customers waiting for the table. All right, students, I hope you understand these concepts. And capacity planning at different service levels. Let me give you an analogy. Uh, if you are having a business of eatable, you are making burgers and selling. To make a burger, you need a burger bun, and you get them, for instance, from some manufacturer, burger manufacturer, and not burger, bun manufacturer. And then you also require vegetables. So vegetables you get from vegetable shop, bun you get from bun manufacturer, and then you take both the supplies, and then you make a burger. So what is happening here? Here it is like a chain. There are different levels, and when a customer arrives for a burger, this business does not have bun but have vegetables. Then they contact the bun manufacturer. If there is bun available, then it can be delivered quickly if it is nearby, and can be you know served to the customer. So what is the problem here? It is that here the facilities are available to create a burger, but here there is no supply, and here also there may not be supply, or here there may be supply but here there may not be supply, here there may be supply but here there may not be supply. Sometimes both of them have supplies, but this lacks the required resource to make a burger. So then there are different stakeholders involved in this. There are different levels, and if any one level fails, the whole process of serving to the customer fails. If anything is not available, this side or this side, then customer will not get the product. Same thing can happen at uh, cloud environment, where if there are multiple providers involved for SaaS, PaaS and IaaS. As company A provides their data center, PaaS company B provide the environment, uh, SaaS company C SaaS company C provides the software APIs. Look at here, three providers are involved. You have a consumer here. Consumer can get SaaS service, can get PaaS service, can get IaaS service. But when customer is utilizing SaaS service, SaaS is built on PaaS and IaaS. So content and capacity planning has to be done at every level. At this level, at this level, and at this level. Only then the right amount of resources will be provided to the consumer. So essentially, it it uh, uh, it involves company A, company B, company C, and consumer. in this scenario for capacity planning? Students, if you remember, SLA is a extremely significant document, a contract that is made between service provider and service consumer, the service level agreement. It contains the requirements and the resource providers, um, conditions and protocols and rules and pricing. All this is included in SLA. So what happens in SLA? A consumer mentions that he needs 1 hour of CPU every day with 10 GB memory. When and consumer is ready to pay perhaps 20 rupees or 10 rupees per day for these services. Now, what is the responsibility of provider? Provider's responsibility is to fulfill these requirements when consumer request. That is the contract. And when SLA has been made between every consumer and provider, then capacity planning uh, turns out to be a simpler task because everything is there in the contract. What are the services and what are the resources and what time and how much and how many, and everything is specified. So it is quite comfortable for both the consumer and the provider to do planning of the resources. So capacity planning turns out to be quite easy. Therefore, SLA plays an important role in capacity planning. So SaaS consumer, SaaS provider, SaaS consumer, PaaS provider, PaaS consumer, and as provider, as consumer. What is this? This is um, they are connected by SLA, and a consumer specify the requirements and provider promises the uh, fulfillment of the requirements. That way, capacity planning is quite simple and you here in this scenario there is no unpredictability because everything is predictable. Consumer predicts and providers also predicts. However, there are cases when every time you can't specify your requirements in advance. So such scenarios demand dynamic capacity planning. Dynamic capacity planning involves to address such unpredictable requests. Sometimes what happens is business may not expect, but a big order comes in uh, within a short notice of time. They may say that after 1 hour, will you be able to provide us the products? Um, Next topic is cloud capacity, how it is viewed by consumers and providers.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes,
Can we say SLA as any paper agreement? Yeah.
yes, yes, it is like a paper agreement, but it is
And it's
not
under
made
any
on paper, it
law?
is like on software, in software.
It is under any business law, ma'am.
Yes,
Okay. But without any signatures, we can't consider any agreement as legal, no, ma'am.
digital signatures are there, Manisha, and without any hardware, without any physical check, you are able to do so many things. How bank will identify you? They identify you through your username, password, OTP. Unique way of identifying people is available nowadays. So it is not necessary to have a physical signature on a paper to identify that an agreement has been made. Now you
Okay,
are
ma'am.
transferring some amount from your account to your friend's account. Later, if you go to bank and say that I have not transferred, please return my account, my amount to my account, will they accept?
No.
They will not. Why they will not accept? Because there is a provision. Unless and until you have your mobile number registered, your email registered, and you get your account, mobile account or internet account, you can't do that transaction.
Is
Is
there
it?
any duration for that, ma'am? For
Ye-
agreement?
yes, yes, it depends. It depends on the consumer. If consumer is willing to make an agreement for 1 year, it will be there for 1 year. If a consumer willing to make for a long term use, it can be for long term use. It all depends on consumer. Suppose you are there now, next semester you have project, you want to have cloud services for a period of 4 months for your project duration. Then what happens? You may take a you make an SLA with AWS, Amazon Web Services. You say that your requirements are these and you are willing to pay this much, and then they provide you uninterrupted and hassle-free service for 4 months. So that contract is for 4 months. After that, it ends.
Is
You
there
know,
any minimum duration, ma'am?
minimum duration for SLA, I have no exact idea, Manisha. Uh, I I think we have to find it out.
Okay, ma'am. It's okay, ma'am. But
Yeah,
it's
that's a
not so
good
much of
question.
important.
No, no, no. It is important. We should know everything. So, yeah, this is also a good question. So you will also try to find out. I'll also try to find. Is there
Okay, ma'am.
any minimum duration to make an SLA? Um, Yeah. For example, if you open an account in the bank with the checkbook, they are asking for some 3,000 minimum average balance to be available. So that is like an SLA. That is an agreement between bank customer and bank, like that. Yes. Any other question?
No, ma'am.
Okay. So back to our discussion. How consumer view the cloud? Consumer view the cloud as a provider of infinite resources, and that kind of view is presented by the provider through various planning and other mechanisms. How is it done? This provider makes an estimation and makes um, a capacity document. wherein the provider will fill it up with what will happen on this day at this time, and then can have a appropriate decisions. That way you can view that cloud is infinite. And capacity planning then and now, how it is used to be done in a traditional environment and how it is being done in cloud environment. In traditional environment, um, this plot shows the actual demand curve, and this predicted demand, this is actual capacity arranged. This one is the actual capacity arranged, these lines. What happens in this is over a period of time. This resources, this actual demand, this one, you see it, this is a predicted demand. This line is predicted demand. This line is predicted demand, and this line is actual demand. You see there is a difference. What is the difference? The difference is um, actual is higher than predicted. All right, and then this now shrinks. The actual demand shrinks. When the actual demand shrinks, you look at this predicted demand, it is higher. Look at here, the gap. This one is higher than this one. And at this juncture, it is clearly observed that there is a resource over provisioning. Over provisioning in the sense predicted are more and actual are less. So there are resources which are not used, which are not utilized. That is A. And then it continues predicted. Apparently actual increases here. When it is increases, what happens? The problem arises. What is the problem? Under provisioning. Under provisioning is denoted by B at this point in time. When predicted is less, actually is more, and there is a huge gap. This is traditional fixed cost model. Next, modern variable cost model. What is modern variable cost model? In this one is actual demand, this is predicted demand, and here you have a provision to accommodate variable resource capacity. The the resource allocation is based on exactly the requirements at that particular point in time. Whatever are your requirements, your allocation will be that much. This another line you can see here, this one, This is variable resource capacity. This one is fixed actually. Whereas our actual demand is not fixed. It varies. You need to have variable resource allocation facility. When you have variable resource allocation facility, you don't find the problems that occurs in traditional environment, which are under provisioning and over provisioning. Approaches for maintaining sufficient capacity. How a provider ensures that um, sufficient capacity is maintained so that there is no resource crunch. So traditional approach is to use n plus 1 rule. What is n plus 1 rule? In this, whenever there are n nodes to support the current requests or demands, there should be plus 1 additional node available, so that in case of any additional demand from the consumer, provider should be in a position to provide the resources from this additional node. This is known as n plus 1 rule. In cloud specific approach, n plus 1 may not always be adequate. Cloud has to offer flexible and scalable approach. Even n plus 1 is fixed. That is not
Ma'am,
need.
once again, N plus 1 rule, shall you please?
Okay.
It's not
Uh,
clear.
okay. I'll repeat.
Okay,
For
thank you.
instance, n plus 1 approach is um, if the daily okay students, uh, n plus 1 approach is a provider when he is sure that when a provider is sure that there are only 10 consumers in a day for 10 virtual machines. What provider does is add an extra virtual machine for any unpredictable consumer that arrives for the service. Instead of 10, which typically is maintained by the provider, an additional one server will be maintained um, to address to the needs of a customer who may be unpredictable to the business. He may or may not come. That extra consumer may or may not come for that purpose. Is it clear, Manisha?
Yes, ma'am. But it's for
Hmm.
another means consumer or for service, ma'am. N plus one is any service or for consumer,
One is
not.
service. One is service. Extra service. For instance, every day you carry two long notebooks. Okay, you know that only there are two subjects scheduled every day, you carry two long notebooks. But then for sometimes what happens, you may have to do some extra preparation for interview or something, so you carry if any teacher does not come, then you may have 1 hour free, so you can do some other preparation. So for that purpose, what do? You carry extra notebook every day to college. Sometimes it will be useful, sometimes it may not be useful. What happens every day, if there are 2 hours, this notebook will not be useful. But some days only you will have one class, not two. Then in that case, this notebook will be of use. Why it will be of use? Because you can write down whatever you want, the notes in this. Suppose um, if a person sell 10 burgers every day, if a eatable shop sell 10 burger every day, what he does is he buy two extra burgers, thinking that maybe um, some more two customers may come. So what happens, suppose if two more customers come for extra burgers, then he is selling 12. If they don't come, this may go waste also. Yes, Manisha,
Okay, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
understand? So the
Yes, ma'am.
one plus one extra server, extra services, extra resources is kept if any um, dynamic, means not the one who is assumed to be coming to the business or to the shop comes in, then that is useful, otherwise it is of no use. That is the 10 n plus 1 rule, n plus 1 approach. But this approach cannot be used in cloud, as cloud is a more complex environment, and flexibility and scalability is a property of a cloud. So directly that cannot be applicable. So here in cloud environment, um, also it supports auto scaling, uh, um, which is about allocating the resources dynamically based on the requirements. So all these things makes capacity planning a difficult task for in cloud, and both consumers and providers are involved in this. So what is the role of auto scaling in capacity planning? Obviously, when it is auto scaling, uh, resources must be pooled. Some of the resources must be pooled in a resource pool from which auto scaling is possible. So there should be some extra resources in the cloud. So capacity and performance are the two important system attributes, because um, if capacity is not planned properly, performance will affect. If only one server is serving 1,000 clients, it becomes a bottleneck. If capacity is planned properly and uh, in advance determined that 1,000 customers will be using our services, then perhaps 10 servers they um, maintain, and then performance will improve because one server is serving only 100 clients. Then steps for capacity planning. First one is expected demand has to be determined. Means how much consumers will request, how much of usage of resources, how many CPUs, how much of memory. Then current response, analyze the current response to load. Service provider has to analyze how much applications are using, what is the current capacity, and any other requirement of additional capacity is requested by any consumer. Analyzing means getting to know how many resources are there, how much is in use, how much are free, how much additional are required. Knowing the value of the system, knowing the value of the system implies that um, you know it is an essential element of business cloud service. If cloud service is interrupted or if fails for a particular reason known to the provider, then consumers will suffer, will incur the financial loss. So that's why provider has to be very uh, careful about the capacity planning, should perform these tasks regularly, and should ensure that it does not let the consumers down and let the consumer incur any financial loss. So how to determine the expected demand? There are several ways to determine the expected demand. One of them is having a graph, maintaining a graph. How many users are using? Suppose now 10 users are using, suddenly more 100 users have entered and it got down, and again 10 continuing, 20, like that. Here you have the number 0, 10, 20, 30. This is time. So at 10 o'clock there are 0 users, at this time there are 20 users, like that. If they create a graph, they can determine how many users are using. Look at here, like this. They can determine it. And analyzing the current load. How can they analyze the current load? This is the load, this is the utilization. How much processor is being utilized, how much memory is being utilized. This shows that um, at the load say 50, 50% of the or 40% of the processor is utilized. So based on the load, it is known the utilization of the resources. Like that for other resources also. And value of system capacity. So cloud um, is an essential element, and then the question that is to be addressed is how business can be benefited by supporting the additional load. The business from provider perspective, because provider is also doing the business from the consumer perspective, because consumer is also doing the business. So how much how much it is beneficial for the provider's business to support additional load, that is determined, and based on that decisions are taken. And please mark the MCQs. Tomorrow we will look at this cloud balancing. Any doubt, students? See you tomorrow.
Ma'am.